The scariest person isn't the one who goes crazy. It's the one who stays perfectly calm after destroying someone. My sister used to be a very gentle person before her boyfriend cheated on her 5 years ago. Since then, she became obsessed with a girl named Anna, the woman she blamed for ruining her relationship. After the breakup, my sister spiraled into a cycle of pure hatred. She constantly stalked Anna's social media, drove past her house for hours, and kept detailed notes on Anna's daily schedule and everyone she met. We shared a room back then. Some nights, I'd wake up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and see her sitting in the dark, staring at Anna's photos. Even creepier, she used a photo of Anna and her ex-boyfriend as her computer wallpaper. I told my parents I was worried about her mental state. However, they just thought she was going through a rough patch after a breakup and didn't want to upset her further. But I knew better. I could always see something dark and distorted in the way she looked at things. Then one day, it all stopped. Anna moved to a distant state to start a new life. From that moment on, my sister became unusually calm. She stopped mentioning Anna's name, deleted all the photos, started doing yoga, and went to work every day like nothing had ever happened. My parents were relieved, thinking she had finally moved on. Last month, I agreed to stay at her apartment to watch her cat while she was away on a 2-day business trip. That night, while I was sleeping in her room, I noticed her pillow felt strange. It had a weird seam running right through the middle that was uncomfortable to lay on. It also felt unusually heavy and had something hard inside. Curious, I pulled out the stuffing and found a small notebook hidden deep inside the pillow. It definitely belonged to my sister. I recognized her handwriting immediately, but the content wasn't sad diary entries. Instead, it was dozens of pages of detailed notes on pharmacology. She had written about acute allergic reactions and cases of food-induced anaphylactic shock. There were even sections analyzing how certain substances could trigger a deadly reaction but break down quickly in the body, making it easy for an autopsy to conclude the death was an accident or natural causes. Some pages noted the onset times, symptoms, and the probability of avoiding detection in blood tests. I was shocked because my sister works in PR. She has absolutely nothing to do with the medical field. I flipped to the very last page. There was nothing but a set of GPS coordinates written in red ink, followed by the words, "Since karma won't punish her, I'll do it myself." A feeling of dread washed over me. I immediately looked up those coordinates online. They led to a small town in the exact state where Anna had moved. When I searched for Anna's social media again, my heart sank. I discovered she had passed away a few months ago from a severe allergic reaction after eating shrimp. It was ruled a tragic accident. Anna's final post was a photo of her standing in front of a flower shop. She was smiling happily with her new boyfriend. I panicked and told my parents everything. I showed them the evidence and the terrifying coincidences, but they just went cold on me. My parents screamed at me, calling me delusional and a bad sibling for trying to frame my sister. My dad was even furious that I had violated her privacy. To make matters worse, my mother accidentally let it slip to my sister right after. When my sister returned from her trip, I rushed to her apartment to confront her. As soon as I reached the door, the smell of burnt paper hit my nose. I ran inside and found her standing in the kitchen next to the sink, which was filled with the ashes of a half-burned notebook. She had destroyed the diary. She wasn't angry or out of control like I expected. She just looked at me with cold, dead eyes and told me I should learn to respect other people's privacy. After that day, she completely cut off all contact with me. In the time since then, my sister's life has seemed wonderful. She posts photos of herself traveling, dining out, and hanging out with friends. People leave comments about how beautiful she looks now that she has let go and moved on. Then one day, I froze when I saw her latest photo. In the picture, she was standing right in front of the same flower shop from Anna's final post. Her expression and her calm smile made me shiver. I realized I am living with a horrific secret. I know my sister killed someone, but I have no legal evidence. My parents act as a shield between her and any suspicion, as if they are more afraid of the truth than anything else in the world. The other day, I accidentally heard that her ex-boyfriend is getting married soon. That evening, when I stopped by my parents' house, I saw my sister sitting alone at the dining table. In front of her was a brand new notebook. She was slowly writing something on the white pages, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. I have never dared to tell this story to anyone. The truth about Nicole isn't just a scary memory. It is a life sentence for my conscience. I met Nicole when I was 20 years old. She was beautiful, charming, and came from a very wealthy family. Even though she had many admirers, she turned them all down. We quickly started a relationship, and I felt like the luckiest guy in the world. I thought I would be the one worrying about protecting my girlfriend from other guys, but the reality was the exact opposite. I couldn't have imagined how jealous Nicole would be, especially since there was no one else in my life. At first, I thought her jealousy and her need to be with me every second was just because she loved me too much. But before long, Nicole started showing signs that made me feel very uneasy. During one of our dates, I accidentally bumped into a waitress at a restaurant. Nicole looked annoyed immediately. Then when she saw me apologize to the waitress, she completely lost her mind. She screamed at the waitress to stop. Then she suddenly smashed a glass, cut her own hand, and forced the woman to kneel down and apologize to me. After she got what she wanted, she cried because of the pain, but she was also laughing. She told me that no one was allowed to hurt me. That was the first time I felt a shiver down my spine. I was terrified looking into her eyes. She became more and more extreme as time went on. She controlled all of my friendships and called me dozens of times every night. She would show up at my job and go into a rage if I didn't answer her texts immediately. I didn't feel any love in the relationship anymore, so I asked to break up. I never expected what happened next. Nicole brought a can of gasoline to my front door and threatened to set herself on fire if I didn't take back what I said. She cried and screamed in the middle of the street. She said that if I left her, she would die right in front of me. I was so scared and embarrassed that I gave in. Just a second later, Nicole was happy again. She ran to hug and kiss me as if nothing had ever happened. Meanwhile, I was truly panicked and feared for my own safety. After that breakup attempt, Nicole's control over me reached a breaking point. She started following me everywhere. Many times I saw her car parked near my office, and she would stay there all day until I finished work. Other times, the car would appear across the street from my apartment, even in the middle of the night. One morning, I opened my door and found a dead bird hanging on my porch. There was a note that said, "If you leave me, this will be your fate." I couldn't take it anymore, so I went to the police. I told them I was being stalked and harassed, but Nicole denied everything. Her wealthy family immediately stepped in, hired expensive lawyers, and made the whole problem disappear. I tried to cut off all contact, but Nicole kept sabotaging my life. She even called the police and lied, saying that I was the one abusing her. Every time this happened, her family would show up to protect her from any consequences. Driven into a corner, I was forced to quit my job and move in the middle of the night. I changed my phone number and left everything behind just to escape her. But just as I was settling into my new life, I felt like I fell into an abyss again. I saw Nicole standing in the parking lot near my new home. She had hired a private investigator to hunt me down. At that moment, I felt like I was going insane. Every noise outside my door made me jump because I thought she was back. I realized that if I kept running or giving in, Nicole would never let me go. I decided to face her directly. I hoped that if I was cold and blunt, she would get bored and leave me alone. I sent her a text demanding that she stop and emphasizing that we were over. Less than an hour later, Nicole showed up at my door with a can of gasoline. She started crying and threatening me again, but this time I wasn't afraid. I coldly told her the truth about her crazy personality, her sick control, and her twisted version of love. I told her clearly that I hadn't loved her for a long time and told her to stop ruining my life. While I was speaking, Nicole frantically poured gasoline all over her body. "I'm sick of your threats. Just stop and leave me alone," I said. Nicole went silent. She looked at me with a hollow, soulless stare that I will never forget. And then, without any warning, she flicked a lighter. The fire exploded across her gasoline-soaked body. I stood frozen for the first few seconds because I couldn't believe my eyes. She actually did it. Her screams of agony ripped through the air and snapped me out of my shock. I rushed toward her, taking off my jacket and trying everything to put out the flames, but it was completely useless. The smell of smoke, the sound of skin blistering, and Nicole's screams have never left my head. Nicole suffered burns over her entire body and died that same night. I went through a long, stressful legal battle with her wealthy family, but I had plenty of evidence to prove how she had destroyed my life with her madness. Eventually, the legal stuff ended, but I was left with a horrific haunting. I escaped Nicole physically, but her spirit has taken root in my life. I haven't been able to love anyone else, and I haven't had a full night of sleep since. Every time I close my eyes, I see those flames. I see her eyes in that final moment, and I hear her screaming in the dark. My husband and I had just gotten married, and we recently moved into a new apartment on the outskirts of town. One day, I left work early because I felt exhausted and miserable due to my period. I just wanted to lie down and rest. As soon as I walked through the door, I caught a faint, sharp chemical scent in the air. I walked around the house to check things out, but I didn't see anything unusual. I tucked myself in, figuring it was just the smell of fresh paint or some leftover cleaning supplies from the recent renovations. I grabbed a quick snack and headed to bed for an early night. While I was drifting in and out of sleep, a terrifying sensation took over. My throat felt like an invisible hand was squeezing it shut. My chest began to burn, and my lungs felt like they were on fire, making it impossible to breathe in any oxygen. A prickly feeling spread across my skin, quickly turning into an intense itch and a searing heat, as if someone had poured boiling water over me. I wanted to scream for help, but my throat was so swollen that I couldn't make a sound. My heart raced uncontrollably before I finally lost consciousness and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My husband told me I had been in a deep coma for nearly 17 hours. My entire body felt heavy and every muscle ached. When I reached up to touch my face, I was horrified to find that it was so swollen and distorted that I wouldn't have recognized myself in a mirror. The doctor confirmed that I had suffered a massive bout of anaphylactic shock from a severe allergic reaction. He told me that if I had arrived just a few minutes later, I would have died. I have a life-threatening peanut allergy, and my husband is the only person who knows. He usually checks my food very carefully, so I immediately suspected he might have made the mistake this time. But then I thought about it. If I had eaten peanuts, the reaction would have happened instantly. Instead, this flare-up happened hours later, right after I lay down in bed. I told my husband to check the security cameras in our bedroom. When we watched the footage, I was stunned. My mother-in-law had shown up while we were both at work. She was wearing a face mask and was bundled up like an intruder, using her own spare key to sneak inside. She pulled back the sheets on our bed. Then she pulled out a bag of fine powder and carefully sprinkled it all over the mattress. Finally, she smoothed the sheets back down to make it look like nothing had happened. I realized that powder was the cause. I had been breathing it in for hours while I slept, leading to the severe reaction. I was furious, but I had to stay calm because I was still in so much pain. I demanded that my husband call his mother to confront her right then and there from the hospital. My mother-in-law answered immediately and sounded completely calm. She casually admitted to entering the apartment, claiming she just wanted to help us clean. She insisted the powder was just cornstarch for moisture because she thought the mattress smelled musty. She denied using peanuts and even scolded me for overthinking things. Even though she saw how sick I was, she didn't offer a single word of sympathy. Seeing her cold attitude made me burst into tears as I remembered all the mistreatment I had endured from her. From the very beginning of my relationship with my husband, she always made it clear she didn't like me. She constantly judged my clothes and my cooking, and she dropped hints that I wasn't good enough for her son. Even at our wedding, she went out of her way to embarrass me in front of our relatives with sarcastic comments. I thought moving into our own place would get me away from her control. I never imagined her hatred for me was so deep that she would try to hurt me like this. I couldn't take it anymore, especially since my life had been in danger. I wanted to call the police, but my husband immediately shot the idea down. He claimed his mother just made a mistake. He even demanded that I apologize for doubting her kindness. In that moment, I realized the man I loved, the one I was willing to sacrifice everything for, would never stand up for me. He was a total mama's boy. I asked for a divorce right there in the hospital room and kicked him out. I reached out to my aunt, who was a lawyer, to handle the case. She managed to find a receipt showing my ex-mother-in-law had purchased 4 pounds of pure peanut flour from an organic shop 12 miles away. The timestamp on the receipt was just hours before I ended up in the ER. With clear evidence of attempted murder, she was sentenced to prison and ordered to undergo psychiatric treatment. However, she only served a little over a year before being granted early parole. On the day she was released, she sent a message through her lawyer saying she wanted to meet me in person to apologize. I found it pathetic and refused immediately. I have zero respect for her and never want to see her face again. Now, I've moved to a different state far away, changed all my contact information, and started a new life. But I still can't let go of the trauma. I live in constant fear that one day she will find me and try to finish what she started.
I have been married to Kane for 6 months. We met on a dating app, and we got married after knowing each other for a year. He works as a software engineer, and I am a graphic designer. We both work from home, so we have a lot of time together. Our life is pretty calm. I thought I'd found the right man to spend my life with. For last year's Thanksgiving, we went to Kane's parents' house in the suburbs for dinner. This is the holiday when my in-laws' family gathers the most. We arrived around 6 p.m. Kane's older brother and his wife had already gotten there. They have 2 small children, who were running around in the yard. My mother-in-law was very happy to see us. She pulled me into the kitchen to help my sister-in-law prepare things and catch up on some gossip. My father-in-law was entertaining a few early relatives. Around 7 o'clock, enough relatives had arrived. Dinner was fun with about 20 people. We sat around the long wooden table, talking about our jobs and future plans. Kane was very attentive to me because this was my first Thanksgiving with his family. I felt pretty comfortable, and the food was great. I felt the warm, close family atmosphere. After we cleared the dinner plates, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law brought out the pumpkin pies. They were still slightly warm and smelled wonderful. My mother-in-law proudly introduced it, saying my sister-in-law had spent the afternoon preparing them. I helped my mother-in-law and sister-in-law pass the slices out to everyone. When it was my turn, my sister-in-law handed me a piece herself. "Try this and see if it tastes good to you." I thanked her and took the first bite. The flavor honestly tasted as good as any high-end restaurant pie I had ever eaten. I took a second, slightly bigger bite. Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through the roof of my mouth. I immediately spat the piece of pie out into my napkin, surprising everyone. In the pie piece, I saw something shiny under the lights. It was a needle. It was about 2 knuckles long. The sharp tip was still stuck with a bit of whipped cream and some blood. My hand was trembling as I held it. Kane turned to me and quickly snatched it out of my hand. Everyone gasped in shock. A few people rushed to check on me, and others started inspecting the pieces of pie they were eating. The children were also stopped from eating so their plates could be checked. "Are you okay? How did this even get in the pie?" I shook my head, unable to answer him because my throat was hurting badly. I could clearly taste the metallic, bloody flavor filling my mouth. Suddenly, my mother-in-law practically screamed. "What did you just say?" Everyone turned their attention toward her. Standing next to her were a few other relatives and my sister-in-law. She backed away. The uncle standing next to her also spoke up. I heard it too. She said, "You should have swallowed it." The air in the room froze. Kane jumped up, walked toward his sister-in-law, and yelled angrily, "What did you do to my wife?" My mother-in-law blocked the sister-in-law, her voice demanding that she stay right where she was. Kane's brother walked over, his face completely confused. I called for my husband in a weak voice. He immediately pulled me up to take me to the hospital. I heard fierce arguing as we got out to the car. The warm room from before now sounded like a battleground. Kane drove me away. In the emergency room, the doctor examined my injury. Luckily, it wasn't too deep, but it had caused a pretty long cut. The doctor disinfected the wound and gave me pain medication. When we got home, it was almost midnight. Kane opened his phone and read a bunch of texts from his mother. He showed me the phone. My mother-in-law recounted everything that happened after we left. In front of the whole family, my sister-in-law had confessed. "Yes, I did it." She said she couldn't accept that Kane was being tricked and having his life ruined by me. She called me a barren woman because we had only been married for 6 months and didn't have a child yet. She claimed I had hidden the truth to trap Kane into marriage. I was too shocked to say anything. Kane had always been by my side and was very supportive. In the following days, my mother-in-law called many times to check on me. She said she was forcing my sister-in-law to go to counseling. Kane's brother also called to apologize on behalf of his wife. Kane was furious. He started looking for jobs in a different city. Within 2 weeks, we'd moved to a small apartment on the West Coast, nearly 300 miles from his parents' house. The wound in my throat slowly healed. but the pain when swallowing lasted for a whole month. One night, when the wound was almost completely healed, I asked Kane about his sister-in-law. He told me he was quite surprised by her change too. She had always been gentle and caring before. He couldn't understand why she would do something like that. I didn't say anything more and never brought up my sister-in-law again. A wife's intuition let me guess the hidden motive behind her actions, but I decided it was better to let the matter drop. Since that day, I haven't contacted my sister-in-law. We still make time to visit my in-laws, but we make sure to avoid overlapping schedules with my brother-in-law's family. Every Thanksgiving that passes, when I see pumpkin pie, I remember the taste from that year. Sweet, rich, and the faint flavor of blood in my throat.
My name is Jeff. I'm 27 years old, and I live and work in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. On the outside, I look like a successful man with a steady job and a constant smile. But deep down, I am made of broken pieces from a childhood that never fully healed. I live with a sickness that I have to manage every day, making sure it doesn't resurface or get worse. When I was 6 years old, my family lived in a small house in the suburbs. It was my parents, my older brother, and me. But the air inside that house was always thick with hatred and screaming. My father used to be a race car driver, and he had a temper like an uncontrollable fire. He would fly into a rage over a tiny smudge on the floor or a small noise. My mother was the exact opposite. She was a block of ice. She gave whatever little kindness she had to my older brother. As for me, she ignored me or looked at me with pure resentment. I think because she hated my father, she hated me too. Even so, I was so terrified of my father's temper that I still tried to cling to her for protection. Back then, my only safe haven was my grandparents' house just a block away. My grandfather was a man of few words, and he always looked so stern that he actually intimidated me. But at their house, I knew I didn't have to be afraid as long as I behaved myself. When I turned 6, the tension at home hit a breaking point. My parents were on the verge of a divorce, and the whole house felt like a time bomb waiting to explode. I remember one late afternoon very clearly. The setting sun turned the backyard deep red. My mother called me outside, saying she had a surprise game for me to play. The backyard was usually where my brother and I played together. Under the old oak tree at the edge of the yard, I saw a rope tied into a noose. My mother led me toward it. She told me to stand on a box she had placed under the tree. She slowly lowered the loop of the rope. She deliberately began to put it around my neck. She did it so slowly, and the most terrifying part was her face. It was completely blank. In that moment, I felt a nameless danger hovering right over my head. Even though I was only 6, I understood that if I put my head through that loop, it was over for me. I fought back with everything I had. I struggled and kicked until I finally fell off the box. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could to my grandparents' house, my chest feeling like it was going to burst as I gasped for air. In the days that followed, I lived in a quiet state of terror. I did everything I could to avoid my mother. I never told anyone what happened under the oak tree, and I did my best to hide the small bruises on my neck. The house became quieter than ever, but that silence felt even scarier than the screaming. Soon after, my parents officially divorced. The court decided that both my brother and I would live with my father. For most kids, this would be a shock, but not for me. I stopped clinging to my mother. After what happened that day, she wasn't a safe person to me anymore. I actually felt relieved that I wouldn't have to face her cold stare every day. It wasn't until years later, when I was in high school and my grandfather had passed away, that my grandmother told me the truth about the divorce. Originally, the court was going to let my brother go with my dad and send me to live with my mother. But the real reason for the split was that my mother had been having an affair with a coworker. She told the court bluntly, "I don't want this child." She saw me as a burden, an obstacle to her plans to remarry. It was my grandfather who stepped in and demanded, "You cannot separate these brothers." Because of his firmness, my father got custody of both of us. I don't know for sure if the affair was true, and considering my father was verbally abusive, I don't blame her for wanting to leave him. But the fact that she viewed me as trash was definitely true. The clearest proof came after the divorce. My mother only reached out to see my brother. She never once asked about me. I don't blame my brother, but I couldn't stop the anger from boiling up. Why were we born from the same woman, yet treated so differently when it came to love? The answer was in the bitter truth my grandmother told me. And it became even clearer when I started making my own money. Suddenly, she wanted to get in touch. There were no "how are you" messages for all those years. No apologies. The only thing she brought were stories about her financial struggles and subtle hints about repaying her for giving birth to me. I used to think that if I saw her again, I might feel soft-hearted. But when the time came, all I felt was disgust. In her eyes, I was never a son. I was a burden when she wanted her freedom, and I was a backup ATM when she fell on hard times. The very first thing out of her mouth should have been an apology. Looking back, I realized that the person who truly saved me from that cruel woman was my grandfather. If he hadn't protected me, I would have been handed over to someone who saw me as garbage. When I was little, I thought he was just a grumpy, stern old man, and I used to avoid him. Now, I realize how much I owe him. I remember his final days vividly. He was lying in a hospital bed, looking so thin, but the way he looked at me was the gentlest I had ever seen. He took my hand and whispered, "Come visit me again, okay?" I broke down crying. The man I had been afraid of was the only one who had truly shielded me. I wish all children in the world could be loved. I wish no other 6-year-old boy has to go through the nightmare I did. I live my life, I work, and I smile, but the scar under that oak tree will always be a reminder. Sometimes, the scariest person in the world is the one who brought you into it. I live in a quiet, neat residential neighborhood in the suburbs of Ohio. Life flows smoothly between work, family, and unwritten community rules. I am a woman who highly values personal boundaries. Last winter, toward the end of November, I was invited to join the neighborhood's organizing committee. It was a small job, mainly revolving around preparing for the annual Night of Lights Christmas event and resolving a few arising issues. Working alongside me on the committee was Angela, a stay-at-home woman who lived just a few houses away. She was about 40, always tidy, simple, and had a perpetual smile. But Angela seemed to have an excessive tendency toward physical contact. As I mentioned, I always value personal boundaries, and Angela's actions made me extremely uncomfortable. She frequently touched my arm and gripped my shoulder when talking. During short meetings, she would deliberately sit close, leaning against me as if we were longtime, intimate friends. The peak was one time when she inexplicably grabbed my hand and squeezed it lightly, with absolutely no valid reason. I politely removed my hand but felt horrified. I tried to maintain physical distance and communicated only with my eyes. Although I clearly signaled my discomfort, Angela constantly tried to pull the relationship closer. The committee's work only required a few minutes of exchange via phone or email, but Angela,
frequently invited me to her house for afternoon tea or asked me out for coffee. I accepted her invitation twice, purely out of courtesy, but subsequently made excuses to decline. Our lifestyles were too different. I worked full-time, with a packed schedule every day, while she was a relaxed homemaker. These two orbits could not intersect. Her persistence gradually turned into intrusion. One evening, I opened the door and found Angela standing there, holding a warm apple cinnamon pie. She smiled brightly and offered the pie. "I just baked a wonderful batch of pie. Wanted to bring some over for you to enjoy." When I refused, explaining that I had just finished dinner, Angela's smile vanished. She looked at me with a hurt expression. "You're too distant with me." She uttered a reproach, her voice full of sulkiness and a slight hint of a whine, like a girlfriend scolding her inattentive boyfriend. I shivered slightly, only managing a strained smile. I began to realize that Angela wanted to be my best friend at all costs, and she would not accept rejection. I felt pushed into a forced relationship I never wanted. This feeling was no longer typical discomfort. It was psychological pressure that kept me constantly defensive, always checking whether Angela might show up somewhere. Things came to a head the week of Christmas. The Night of Lights event was about to happen. Angela invited me to the Christmas night market in the next city. I refused firmly, but maintained a polite tone. She then messaged and called, repeating the request for over an hour. That persistence completely breached my defenses. In a fit of frustration and desperation, I was forced to raise my voice over the phone. "I already told you I can't go." After that call, silence ensued. The Night of Lights happened and concluded. We had no further contact. I sighed with relief, thinking everything was over. The shudder and discomfort had passed. I could return to my normal rhythm of life. But a few weeks later, late one evening, as I was reading, my husband came home with an extremely serious expression. He walked into the bedroom, locked the door, and then recounted what had happened. "I just saw the woman you told me about, the one from the neighborhood committee. She was standing right in front of our garage door. Specifically, she chose a spot in the shadows. She was holding something long, like the kind of lighter used to light a gas stove. I swear I saw her expressionless face clearly in the light from the lighter. It was just cold." I immediately guessed my husband was talking about Angela. My husband, startled, called out to her loudly. Angela flinched violently, and the lighter dropped to the ground. She turned and ran straight into the street, disappearing into the darkness without saying a word. The very next morning, we immediately called a contractor to install a security camera system throughout the house and motion sensor lights in every blind spot. I no longer felt safe in my own home. I lived in constant worry, unable to know or guess what she would do next. After that incident, Angela virtually disappeared from our sight. She no longer walked on the street, nor did she leave her house. But that absence only made me shudder more. Nearly a year passed in that simmering fear. I developed a habit of checking the door locks and the lights on the porch. Only when I heard that Angela's family had sold their house and moved out of the neighborhood did I truly feel released. To this day, whenever I recall Angela's face, her whining voice, and her over-the-top smiling expression, I still feel a deep chill.
I had lived in Cedar Grove for many years, and I felt lucky to have a respected man like Pastor Andrew Patterson as my neighbor. "People God puts in our lives to remind us of goodness," my mother always said, and I felt that was so true of Andrew. He always wore a gray suit, carrying an old brown leather Bible. He had a warm voice and kind blue eyes. He moved in next door with his wife and 3 children. His wife Sarah seemed a little shy, but I figured it was just moving to a new place and needing time to adjust. Their children, Emma, Michael, and Grace, were all very polite, always nodding hello when they saw me in the yard. Pastor Patterson held prayer meetings at his house for people who couldn't make it to church, often visited the hospital, and was always ready to help when someone was having a hard time. When a widow down the street fell and broke her leg, Pastor Patterson went shopping for her every week, getting her what she needed. Another family was having money troubles, and he quietly paid for their child's school fees. It was admirable and respectable, such a perfect family. I often said that to my wife, Margaret. But she had a different feeling about them than I did. Margaret thought it was odd that the Patterson family never had visitors. Sarah always wore long sleeves, even on hot summer days. I told Margaret she was noticing too many little things, that it was normal for people to want their privacy. Then one day, I realized Sarah wasn't around as much. When I asked, Pastor Patterson explained that she was taking care of a relative in another state. With a sad smile, he said he missed Sarah a lot, but family always came first. But Margaret was suspicious. She said she hadn't seen Sarah come back for a visit, not even for her daughter's birthday. I explained that not everyone could travel often, especially a busy pastor's family with so many kids. A few months later, Michael, the oldest son, also disappeared. Pastor Patterson proudly announced that he had received a scholarship to a boarding school on the East Coast. Emma, their oldest daughter, started to become quieter and more withdrawn. When I asked how she was doing, she would just nod and quickly walk away. I once saw her crying by the trash cans behind their house one afternoon, but when I went to ask if she was okay, Pastor Patterson came out and called her inside. I never forgot the scared look in Emma's eyes at that moment. But I just thought it was a normal father scolding his daughter, plus Sarah had been gone for a long time. Margaret worried about the girl, but I defended Pastor Patterson. It wasn't easy for a man to raise a daughter on his own. A few months later, Grace, the youngest child, was also gone. Pastor Patterson said she had moved in with her mother. Now only he and Emma were left in that big house. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman, but she always looked tired. Margaret noticed Emma often left the house alone in the evenings, sometimes as late as 10 p.m. She would go to the convenience store and come back with bags of different sizes. Margaret thought Pastor Patterson was making Emma do too many chores. Of course, I disagreed with my wife's opinion. In the time that followed, Pastor Patterson remained active in the community, always ready to help others. He started a support program for troubled teens and organized family workshops. More and more people admired him. One winter night, when I woke up in the middle of the night, I was startled to see Emma standing outside in the yard, staring straight at our bedroom window. I turned on the light, but she was gone. Margaret thought I had dreamed it, but the footprints in the snow were still there the next morning. Margaret and I were very confused. If it really was Emma, maybe she needed help? A few weeks after the night Emma was in the yard, I started noticing other strange things. A strong chemical smell would sometimes come from the Pattersons' basement, especially on the nights Emma went out late. Margaret said it smelled like strong cleaning fluid, the kind auto repair shops use. One morning, I woke up to the sound of sirens. 3 police cars were parked in front of the Patterson house. Margaret and I rushed outside with the other neighbors to see what was happening. The police brought Emma out of the house. Then came Pastor Patterson, still in his pajamas but with a frighteningly calm look on his face. When he looked towards me, for a moment, I felt frozen by his cold stare. The neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering to each other that it must be a misunderstanding. In the days that followed, the forensic team worked non-stop. They dug all over the backyard and basement of the Patterson house. The chemical smell grew stronger and stronger. Margaret had to keep all our windows closed. The newspapers revealed horrifying details. Sarah's remains were found with signs of being tied up, while Michael's and Grace's remains were scattered in plastic bags next to bottles of corrosive chemicals. And there might have been others. people who used to go to the Patterson house for prayer meetings but were never seen again. Emma had told the police everything about her father. She spoke of the years living with a monster, having to witness all the disgusting crimes her so-called father committed against her own mother and siblings. Emma herself had to carry the heavy plastic bags down to the basement. The nights she stood outside in the yard, desperately looking for a way to get help. The newspapers continued to report from the trial, where Emma recounted the things her father used to say. Patterson always claimed he had a holy mission to teach those who didn't follow his will. It started with controlling every action and word of his wife and children, then gradually escalated to violence when they didn't listen to God through him. He repeatedly said he was saving the souls of the people he killed, while using his reputation as a pastor to lure vulnerable churchgoers to his home. There, he could carry out his brutal acts of control without anyone suspecting. I sank into my armchair, reading every line of the newspaper with trembling hands. All the times I defended him, insisted he was a good man, felt so incredibly foolish. There were so many signs I had missed. Emma's scared eyes, the shouting at night that I thought was the TV, the chemical smell I thought was him cleaning. Margaret held my hand, unable to speak. We sat in silence in the living room, looking out the window at the house that was now empty. Pastor Patterson was sentenced to life in prison. Emma was taken for psychological treatment. And I would have to live with the thought that for all those years, I had slept peacefully next door to a killer. The Patterson family's house is now closed up, a dark memory for everyone in the neighborhood. This story is inspired by a true crime case. Pastor Andras Pandy, once seen as a pillar of morality in his community, was revealed to be behind a series of mysterious disappearances within his own family. His 2 wives and several of his children vanished without a trace, with false explanations and fabricated evidence used to cover up the truth. The investigation led to gruesome discoveries at Pandy's various properties, where police recovered bone fragments, teeth, and traces of bodies disposed of with chemicals. His daughter, Agnes, initially accused, then recanted, but eventually admitted to participating in these horrific crimes with her father. In 2002, Pandy was sentenced to life imprisonment. Although convicted for 6 victims, the number of missing people suspected to be linked to him may be as high as 60, and the identities of many remain unknown.